All right. Welcome to the REI 101 podcast YouTube channel. I am here with my good friend, partner in crime, Alberto. How are you doing today, brother?
I am doing well, man. Enjoying this beautiful weather this
Yeah.
today. Just you know, crossover from the weekend. It was just so nice outside, but it's really nice today too. So got a fresh cut. So I'm ready to go for the podcast.
Oh, that's very inspiring. I need to get my hair cut. I keep thinking about that, but I don't do it. I don't do it. I'm thinking about just shaving my head so I don't have to think about my hair at
That's what I
all.
do.
Dude, I went outside this morning and I got about 2 minutes into a run and I noticed that I had no feeling in my fingers.
It
So
was cold.
we are not used to that kind of cold here in Houston.
Yeah,
So
it was cold.
any big wins for you this week?
Um, yeah, I might have mentioned it last week, but we got our demo done on the two houses that we tore down where we're going to build three new houses. So we got that completed. Got some of the other things that have to happen, like we get a soil test and a topo survey. Those things were done, so we're just waiting on those to be delivered to my email to go out to the architect and the civil engineer so we can get those things started. We delivered some select fill dirt at the duplex site that we're building as well, so that was pretty cool. So we're still doing prep work there to
Nice.
get that built up since that's in a flood zone. So we're still working on the prep work
You feel
there.
like you're picking up momentum? Are you seeing more activity with everything?
Yes, yes. I had someone reach out and we got another lot under contract on Saturday. So we'll be building another duplex. So
That dude, congratulations.
thank you.
I don't know what everybody else is seeing, but I posted on the market update on Thursday. Average interest rate for last week is 6.02. So we're almost back in the land of the fives, which has been, it doesn't seem that long ago that we were closing deals at 2.5%, but it's been 3 years that we've been above 6%. It's
Yeah.
been quite some time. So we we are definitely seeing more activity. We've executed more in contracts in the month of January, and we're only halfway through January than we have in any month in our since we started.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Our guest, Jared Shaffer from St. Louis, is joining us, and I don't know if they're seeing. I want to welcome, but before we bring him on, I want to tell you this is one of the smartest guys I've had a chance of meeting. Um, Incredible leader. He's overseeing three different market centers. One in St. Louis, St. Charles, and Schaefer. He's got 1,300 agents that he's overseeing, but he's also got quite a bit of experience in residential and commercial real estate investing as well. So you put all the leadership together, you put the financial sense, the decision making, makes for a really great conversation. So Jarrett, he's not just coaching theory, he's operated at scale as an investor, as a broker, a decision maker, including successfully selling an entire real estate portfolio. So I'm looking forward to getting to know more about that and more about that process. So, Jarrett, thanks for coming on, man. Thank you for being with us today. Appreciate you joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So I got so many questions to
Mhm.
to ask. You've been doing this since the '90s,
Mhm.
and you've seen so many different changes over the decades. Can you tell us a little bit about? Did you start in the world of real estate brokering? Did you start as an agent, or did you start with investment? And how did you get started with that?
Actually, I started in the title insurance business. So in Virginia Beach, a title insurance agency, and we grew it to the point of six offices, about 27,000 closings. And that's really where you get to see behind the curtain as to like what's really taking place with traditional lenders, hard money lenders, those that are doing with the cash, how the difference between agents and just the overall different philosophy of investors. So that's really where the core of that took place, and then later getting mortgage license, and then later into the real estate brokerage world, where I sit right now, firmly just mortgage. or I'm sorry, just real estate brokerage and at Keller Williams.
So when did you get started with the investment side of the?
Well, so for myself personally, when right away, but it was a slow process, and it was one of
Hmm.
those things where I just had a really good agent that was patient and encouraged to just do one. And sometimes we see so many investors that just want to jump in and get like a huge portfolio really, really fast.
Right.
And I've seen that, I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. And the one thing that I've always found to be very successful is when
Mhm.
somebody just takes it one at a time.
Yeah. So talk to us about that process. So what decisions or what information did you need going into the deal? What what questions were you asking yourself? Like what had to happen in order for you to feel comfortable and confident? Or did you? Was there still some mystery behind it before jumping in?
Yeah, I think, initially when like really green and just taking a look at it, you don't know what you don't know. So understanding that there's a difference between purchasing something to hold and something that's going to be a fix and flip. And,
Hmm.
and it really comes down to like what's the end game, right? It's really important to know where it is you want to go. I love that John Maxwell, where he talks about climbing the ladder, but be careful to not climb the ladder to find out it's leaning against the wrong wall, right?
Right.
Think ahead a little bit and determine what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish and by when.
So part of what we want to talk about is risk, how to mitigate and how to approach risk because we do have we do have a lot of people that, like Albert, who understands the risk and is able to make an educated decision on how to approach that. And then for the most part, not every deal is a home run, but staying in motion, and we have a lot of people in our world that stay in motion that are being consistent. But we got some guys that are still kind of leaning on the fence, not moving forward. How how has your mindset changed in regards to risk? How did you approach risk back then, and how did that change over the years?
I think uh, the one thing that I find with a lot of investors, they are wannabe investors, but they never pull the trigger.
Hmm.
And that part, they analysis to paralysis, they just never do anything with it. You don't want to go to that end of the spectrum to where you never make the move. But then there
Right.
are others that are just like total risk free and too cavalier, and that is a whole nother set. So I think somewhere down the middle makes really good sense. I think that from investors that knowing your numbers is really important, but sometimes that leads over to that paralysis piece.
Right.
If you just have a really simple metric, like I love the 1% rule. I mean, it's
Okay.
really, really simple, right? Whatever you're going to purchase it for, your total acquisition cost, just make sure that your rent is going to be that. And
Right.
that helps filter out 70 to 80% of the properties that are just the wrong properties, allows you to have a smaller amount and then to know your buy box and then just stick within your buy box and know what it is you want to accomplish. And then when you find the right deal, it feels right, it looks right, then pull the trigger.
So you mentioned two things: the 1% rule, and then you talked about sticking to your buy box, which is that is critical as well. That are you using that 1% rule for single family rentals, or do you apply that to commercial or multifamily as well?
I apply it to everything. And it helps because there's a lot that just right out of the gate, that's just going to be that first part of the filter that just eliminates a whole bunch. And then it allows it to come down to a smaller group,
Yeah.
segment, and then you can digest those a little bit faster, and with more detail. So so that's I like it on both approaches. Where you're not going to find it work is a property that you want to live in. I mean, it just
Hmm.
typically doesn't work like that, right? The prices are
Yeah.
it's too nice. But for an investment property, we can find them. And in St. Louis, we can get above that 1% rule. And there's some investors like, well, no, I won't do it unless I get a 2%. But that's even a blind squirrel can find a nut once in a while. But I've never found a unicorn. It's tough to find those
Yeah.
properties, and you spend all your time searching, and everybody's looking for that same thing. It makes it really hard. So. Yeah, I think sometimes, it may not be a grand slam home run, but good solid base hits. That's what we
That's
need.
that's what I always say. You don't win games by hitting home runs. You win games by getting on base, and
Right.
that rule gets you on base. Go
and
ahead, Albert.
you have to get in the game, right? Like we mentioned before, there's so many people that are on the sidelines. And I just want to just add a little bit more on working with these like rules of thumb, right? This knowing your buy box and this 1% rule is what that essentially does. It filters out a lot of the noise. A lot of these deals, these wholesale deals and things like that that might be coming into your inbox.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm not looking in Conroe. I'm not looking in Spring, right? I'm looking in these specific zip codes. And that's something that we teach our new investors too that join our program is focus on a market because then you get so good at that market. Austin, you know this too, Jared, that you can just now look at a deal and not even really have to run it through the spreadsheet
Hmm.
anymore. Cool. This is something that I want to dig deeper into, right? This
Yeah.
makes sense once you learn your buy box, and then having those rules of thumb, right? Sometimes 1% is great. Sometimes it may be a little bit less, right? There may be an appreciation play there or something like that. But having those rules of thumb and kind of knowing when you go in, it reduces all that noise where people would just kind of get fearful because they're getting
Yeah.
too much data. They're looking at too much information.
Jared, talk more about the buy box because Albert and I we talk about this a lot about being more intentional, specific about you know because we get calls from investors. You're like, I'm just looking for a great deal, and they can't define what a great deal is. How do you define that the buy box, or for other investors, how would you help them gain clarity on what their buy box should be?
Yeah, so I think that when just looking at like a standpoint of risk, a buy box that the property is more turnkey, it already has tenants that are in it, the cash flow is already flowing, a much lower risk. Get into a property that looks like a great deal, but nobody's lived in the property for a long time. You have no
Hmm.
idea if it's going to pass occupancy or what it's going to take. So we have occupancy laws here, right? So it has the city actually comes out and checks the property before we can put a tenant in it. That's a big deal. And if it doesn't pass occupancy, the inspectors, they don't come out and give you a checklist of things you need to do. They come in, they look, they see an outlet that's failed, they fail it, and then they leave. And then, they come back, they say, oh, the outlet's good.
Yeah.
Then they find something else that's broke. And
Right.
man, this takes the delay, right? It just takes month after month before you can get a tenant in the property, where you lose all that when you don't have if there isn't such a requirement of having to do the repairs. If the property is already occupied, the risk goes way down. So I think that's part of the buy box as well. And then you got to know your capital. If it needs repairs to be able to,
Hmm.
if you have to put $100,000 into an apartment, do you have the cash, right? That
Right.
becomes a big deal. And that's where I see some investors that probably the biggest problems is they just bite off more than they can chew in regards to being able to repair the property.
So yeah, so going into risks, continuing with our talk about risk. So what risks do you think that beginners are obsessing over that really don't matter? Does that make sense? What are the risks that people tend to think too much about that aren't as big of a deal?
Yeah, I think the that a lot of the brand new investors for the first time when they're looking at an actual project, they are they are just trying to find the absolute best deal that's available.
Hmm.
And they will just continue to scrutinize it and scrutinize it and scrutinize it until it's gone. And they're just missing other things that might, they're looking for that 10 out of 10, where if you can get 8 out of 10, it's probably enough.
Yeah. No, that's good. Albert mentioned are going with what you were saying about uh, having the inspectors come out and nickel and dime. That's probably some of the risks that you see that are being ignored. And Albert, you can probably speak to this too. What other risks do you think newer investors are ignoring that they need to be focused on more?
I think when investors, we teach them how to focus on the big things too,
Hmm.
right? Is those major structural things because we teach our students to look for fixer-uppers. There are a few students, myself included, who acquire turnkey properties, maybe things that are more recently built, like would be maybe considered new construction and things like that. We're still doing inspections
Yeah.
on those, right? But I think one thing that students overlook is location.
Okay.
is right. They'll scrutinize this deal and really kind of dive in because I've seen the other end of that spectrum where they'll go buy a bad deal, right? Not scrutinize it so much and then it's gone. I mean, and that's awful, right? We don't want that to happen. But then not looking at the right metrics when it comes to crime, when it comes to occupancy in the area, like what rating does a neighborhood have, right? Is it
Hmm.
an A, B, C, D area, And that kind of goes back to what we talked about in the beginning was not having a well-defined buy box,
Right.
right? Is cool. Let's go drive the area. Let's take a look at the investor activity. Let's take a look at the metrics here. What kinds of people are renting, doing those things. And they just want to go find a deal. Can I make money on this thing? Right? And the data might say yes, but there's some other intangible things that you need to go take a look at this area as well. And that's where I see students kind of overlook those things and they're focused more on just the numbers, just the data only.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
S-
uh, go ahead, Austin.
Jared,
Sorry.
I wanted to go back to your story of how you went from acquisition, how you grew your portfolio and scaled. And then what was this at what point did you say, "Hey, it's time for me to unload?" And then you ended up selling your entire portfolio.
Well, so it was a nice, easy, one at a time acquisition for me, and it was safe. It felt safe. So it's a mindset that's a little different than a lot of the investors, and I know a lot of coaching goes to the point of being able to grow really fast, and certainly the numbers on the page really show that difference. But as far as like a risk tolerance, I just know I have a lower risk tolerance. And the more leveraged I become, the higher my stress level gets. And the higher stress level I get, my quality of life goes down.
Hmm.
So I'm willing to adjust that and to be able to risk less, go a little slower for a better quality of life. And I know that's not going to be everybody's jam. And they're just looking to make as much as they can, as quick as they can. And that's fine. It really works. But with a little bit of after doing it for like a decade, um, and the stress level, if the stress level is not coming down and not coming down, that's for me where I decided that it was time to make a small adjustment, and that's just to work a little bit slower, and instead of constantly leveraging and leveraging and leveraging, to be able to even pay some of them off. I mean, it
Yeah.
just something feels really solid about having a property that's paid in full. Does it
Mm.
make sense on paper? Never, right? You should always have it leveraged. But there's something that psychologically that works when you do have a property that's paid full, and when you've got a dozen of them that are paid in full, and you've got that million or $2 million worth of just asset. That's
Hmm.
it's kind of nice. So it's a little countercultural, I know, to the typical investor world, but I
Sure.
do think it makes a difference.
I think you're hitting on an incredibly important point. You're talking about stress management.
Yeah.
Like how much of a factor is your stress level playing? And it sounds like you're pretty actively monitoring your stress level. Like with what you've been able to accomplish, it's kind of stressful just kind of thinking about it from my perspective. But how do you manage that stress level and how do you monitor? I guess monitoring the stress, because
Yoga.
are you really yoga?
I
That's
do. I do
great.
a lot of yoga, and it really does help. And then also, things like breathing exercises that when you recognize you're triggered to be able to pull that stress level down. Keep exercise, diet. Those things. I mean, they're cliche, but they really do make a really big difference. And then again, just recognize what it is that we want to accomplish. And a lot of times we get to the point where it's like one goal, we obtain it, and we automatically want to set another goal, and I did it for so many years. Like I worked with a guy named Vern Harnish, and Vern is just a great business coach. And a Gazelle is, that's his book, and it's like 25% gross. Or it's a growth increase of 25% every year for 5 consecutive years. That's massive growth, right?
Hmm.
It's not for everybody.
No.
And sometimes it becomes a little bit of addictive, right? So it's like we always want more, we always want more, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But at some point in time, how much is enough, and how much money is enough, and to be able to recognize what it is that we really want to accomplish, and if you're there, just to be okay with it, be content. If you're
But
not, then then you got to keep working.
but Jared, we're ass kickers. We're go-getters. We like to set big goals. We got a big vision. And if we don't hit those goals, then what?
Yeah, no, I get it. I do. I get it. And but then there's just the other side of the ledger, right? So it's like I think that's a part of the yoga that's really nice. It's that balance, right? That it's not always having to push really, really hard. And sometimes you can assess back and go, wow, you know what? I'm in a good place here. And if you are in a good place, then it's okay to be able to slow it down. um, Not something that we typically talk about when coaching, because most people they're at that point of lack and they want to get to the point of growth. They need their ass kicked a little bit, right?
Hmm.
That's by far the majority of the time. But after we do get the momentum, at some point in time, I think a good coach is able to say, "Hey, when is enough? Enough."
Yeah. So how do you know when to slow down? How do you know when to unload?
Well, I I'd like to think that I just like it was it was pure knowledge and wisdom, but it really was just plain dumb luck to be able to sell. I sold my entire portfolio at the top of the market, which was just amazing. Like, 3 months afterwards, the it just this was back in with mortgage meltdown crisis.
Hmm.
And that's when that was the largest portfolio. And then since then it's been a smaller increase of
Yeah.
growing it a little bit smaller. But that's okay. Sometimes when you have your finger on the pulse, you do it every day, you can feel when the market shifts and when it's about to shift. So, Albert, do you feel that as well?
Yeah, and it's about being consistent, being in the market, taking action, learning how to read the tea leaves, so to speak,
Mhm.
right? And understanding um, trends. Austin, we've talked about that a lot on our
Yeah.
calls, is looking at trends. It's easy to kind of look back at the last 6 months and things like that, but what's on the market right now? Like, what are days on market right now in this area that I'm looking at? Are they trending up? Right? Or are we entering a different phase of the market at this point in time, which we all, felt that coming, and now a lot of us who are in it have experienced it, full force, like this
Hmm.
this buyer's market that we've been in with this increased inventory. So I wanted to add just a couple of things too about, being able to, right, when you were in the accumulation phase, acquisition phase, and then you offloaded at the top of the market and really understanding when to do that. Like for me, myself, like being relatively new to real estate, really just being in for the last 5 years, it's more of we see people in different stages, right? They're beginners, right? They're what Austin was talking about. They're just go-getters. They just want to just pound the pavement, go look for deals and acquire at a healthy speed, right? At a healthy rate, not biting off too much more than you can chew. You want to bite off a lot, right? And sometimes we learn how to chew along the way, because that was the phase that I'm in, that I'm currently in, is we're still acquiring properties. We've acquired a lot over the past 5 years, and we're entering different phases now with building. It all has to do to, I think it depends on people's personalities, right? Because you mentioned stress management,
Mhm.
and
Hmm.
right, somebody who's in their mid 30s and just really trying to get out of the rat race and trying to figure out how can I switch from having to work a 9 to 5 to really focusing on real estate, they're probably used to the stress. Like, fine, this is no different than my 9 to 5 job, but now I'm working on building our own empire and not someone else's. Whereas someone who might be towards kind of the end of this career or maybe a different phase in their real estate career, hey, you know what's more important to me? Not being stressed, not having to worry
Right.
about property taxes and insurance going up and all of these, and the new laws and regulations in the municipalities where I have rental properties, right? Managing this empire.
Hmm.
I agree with you too, 100%, is when is enough, right? Is I think society and the culture teaches us is just more, 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 acquire, give me more, but I think there's a balance between, hey, I'd rather have some paid off properties, right? And I know like that return on that internal return is really low because I've got all that equity in that property. But
Yeah.
when I'm 60 in 10 years, I would love to have 10 paid off properties, right? Like that would be amazing. And they can all be single family homes. They don't have to be apartment complexes and things like that. But that's going to be a nice income for me, right? So that's kind of our goal too, is not owning hundreds of doors or big, large apartment complexes. I'm saying that now. I would like to have something that's manageable, that I don't have to manage a huge team. They can manage the properties for me in like 10 years from now.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it changes. I think it changes over time as well. So it's like the advice I'd give is just set your goal, right? Maybe it's
Mhm.
$1 million worth of properties, and then just keep it there. Stay focused. And I had the privilege in Virginia Beach of working with the Navy SEALs. They talk about aim small, miss small, and it's it's really true, right? Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And
Mhm.
these guys are, I mean, they're just really powerhouses, but they just stay focused on their goal. And then until you obtain it, you just won't know what it feels like. But when you do obtain it, before setting another big goal, like some folks go 1 million, then they want to do 10, just live with that 1 million and see how does that feel, right? Is it good? Am I comfortable with it? Maybe that's it. Or maybe you get in, you're like, nope, I know I can do a lot more. I've got a lot more gas in the tank. I've got a lot more capacity. And, now I'm a better leader.
Yeah.
It's come down to that ability because there's only so much you can do on your own. But if you have a team of people that are around you, that's a whole different animal. So, doing something on my own, like
Mhm.
in 6 months, just managing properties, like 100 properties in the last 6 months. It's great. But my goal for 2026 is 1,000 by the end of the year. So to do that, I can't do it on my own. I have to have a group of people that are around me, and that leverage is not only in finances, but it's also in people. It's
Right.
finding right relationships with the right people that are around you.
That goes back to the old adage, new levels, new devils. Like, we may be, on our way from 1 to 10, but once we get to 10, it's like sometimes like it's a completely different animal at that point, more people involved, and it's like a
Definitely.
different business. Or when you get to 100 units, it's like a totally different animal at that point as well. So,
Also, this 18-month rule, I'm not sure who invented it, but it's sometimes we set a goal for something and we go after it. The first 6 months is just it feels like nothing is working. And then the second 6 months, we get some traction. And
mhm.
then by the 18th month, it feels like everything is like, oh, it's finally where it's supposed to go. And you look back and go, God, it just feels like it took so freaking long to get
Yeah,
it, right? But to be able to do those things, it does take some time. And
yeah,
especially if you've never done it before. So the biggest advice is if you're confident that this is what you want to do, pull the trigger and just do it.
yeah,
yeah,
Just get one.
yeah,
Your original question will like, what's the biggest mistake? I think the biggest mistake is that folks just don't they just won't pull the trigger. They just won't do
hmm
it because they're trying to get it so perfect that that they don't make any mistakes. And the truth is, you've got to make mistakes. You've got to have some
right.
failures and fail forward is the key, right? It's not fail and quit. It's fail and move forward, fail and move
mhm,
forward, fail and move forward.
Failure and pain, two really good teachers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
There's no
Talk
So,
about it.
substitute experience. I mean, it just isn't.
100%. So I want to go a little bit more into leverage because you did say something that we're not hearing a lot of these days. You mentioned sometimes having that paid off asset just emotionally is more valuable than the numbers on paper, right? When would you say leverage borrowing money, when does that actually reduce the risk instead of increase it? And when does it increase the risk instead of reducing it?
Well, I'm going to use this more from what I've seen than what I've been truly involved with. If I'm buying something 100% myself, I've got all the risk myself.
Hmm.
If I can accumulate a pile of money with other investors to get, let's say we get into a multifamily or into an office building, if you've got 10 people that all have $1 million in that or did that risk is reduced as me as an individual, but we're into a bigger property that way. That has a tendency to that feels better as
Hmm.
well. It's not always easy to find those 10 investors that have that same $1 million available, but it's that is where a sense of there is more leverage, but the risk for me personally has been reduced.
Right. Any
Mm.
any signals that that tells us when a property is over leveraged, even if the numbers technically work?
Um, well, I the way I think about that question is the that I know a lot of there's a lot of training that's try to leverage it as much as the maximum amount of leverage you can put into the property, have as much debt on it as and very little equity in the property, so that
Hmm.
you can pull your equity out and you can buy more property. And it makes sense. And there's lots of there's lots of advantages to that. There's also I've seen a lot of really old money folks that have these properties where these assets have been paid in full for a long time, and they've got a ton of equity that's available in one property. And when that sweet deal comes around, that is where you kind of got to you put all your chips to the middle. They've got all that cash that's available in their property where they can pull it out and buy into that one magic property. That's just the one where if they didn't have the equity in the property, they
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do it.
Mm.
Yeah. Has your perspective on debt changed over the years?
My perspective on debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I certainly see the advantage of buying and then being able to, fix it up and refinance it and pull the equity out. There's a lot of advantages there. I'm just saying that there are some advantages of being able to have some equity within the properties as well. So
Yeah.
everyone's perspective on it's a little bit different. Certainly the banks like it, right?
Yeah.
Investors like it as well. The more equity you've got,
The more collateral the banks get.
right?
Hey Jared, and like in today's environment, where do you see people misusing leverage the most? Or do you see that anywhere?
Um, Pro I've been working with this group of investors. I think they're also they're from they're not from St. Louis. St. Louis is this really crazy market because we've got great properties here and the economy is really strong. But you really can truly get a $50,000 property in St. Louis that's able to be lived in, and
Hmm.
that's just not common throughout the world, right? So Zillow and a lot of these really great places have us at, like within the top 5 places to invest in real estate. And where I see is out of state investors, mostly like on the East Coast or on the West Coast, they're like really, and we're smack dab in the middle. It's almost like they're like, they're on a crack high, right? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta buy more, I gotta buy more. And they just, they just are throwing more at it before they finish up a project. And that makes, I think that risk for them just is going really high. And I see them crash and burn. It's like they get in, their portfolio grows to the point where they've got a lot of properties, but they're not able to get them finished and
Mhm.
rented. So that they're just shelling out more cash than what they've got coming in. And if you live in an area like ours where you have occupancy, you can't put a tenant in until the property passes. They're buying these really great properties, but they're buying them too fast and just not able to get them rehabbed quick enough. So that's where you have to have that really great team of people that whether it's a property management company or you've just got your contractors locally, you can buy them. These fix and flips
Hmm.
are really great, but you got to be able to complete the deal.
Mhm.
And I also see that some of the brand new investors are much more trusting with contractors. So, like I'm not a fan to give a contractor any money until they've done the work on the property. I've just seen too
Mhm.
much of it disappear. So you give a contractor 50% of the cash to fix up the property and then you can't get them back to the property.
Yeah.
It's just a disaster. So you got to find those right people that are willing to work and they're willing to come out and get the work done before receiving payment. We always want to pay them.
Hmm.
Just there's so many of those folks that just don't work. They don't do business like that, so it makes it hard. Makes it hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys experience that with contractors in your neck of the woods where they take your money, but then you can't get them back. Yeah.
We hear stories. I don't
Yeah.
have that issue.
No,
Javier's on the
That
call.
that's happened to me once or twice, but on very, very small scale, right? Very small scale and enough so where it wasn't that big of a deal. But most of the contractors that we work with, they come from our internal investor network. So and those contractors know like, hey, do a decent job, right? Everybody eats forever, right?
Hmm.
Don't screw anybody over. And then, word gets around fast, especially in this Houston market.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we mentioned earlier that rates seem to be dropping. If rates continue to drop, Jared, what mistakes would you see that our investors may rush to make? What warnings would you give the investment world in the next 6 months, especially if we go down to like 5.5 or lower?
yeah. Well, I think psychologically, what that helps. that's going to help that the first time home buyer market more than any. So I think that really helps from a real estate agent perspective. It's not so much on the investor side, but that unless we're purchasing the properties, we're fixing them up to be able to sell them to a first time home buyer. I think that interest rate really makes a difference. The On the commercial side, most of the commercial loans are going to have a 5-year call, and it's just looked at a little bit differently. I
Yeah.
think 30-year mortgages, is more for that, the mom and pop, or first the family that's going to be purchasing a house, for long term, as opposed to the investors. So I see that making a bigger impact long term for the society as a whole, and for families that have always been lifelong renters and the ability to be able to purchase. Um,
I
what,
think
what are your
I'm
what are your thoughts on that five? What do you think that it will? Think it'll make an impact?
well, I think okay, so one thing that we're seeing now is on the commercial side, there's a lot of buyers that went on a frenzy on in like 21, 22. And like you said, they had those 5-year balloons and those are coming due.
Yeah, they are.
And those guys are like at 4% interest on RV parks and multifamily properties.
Mhm.
And so I think there's going to be a lot of I'm anticipating that there's going to be an opportunity for buyers to buy. But you also got to the buyers need to remember they're buying from people that bought 5 years ago. And you don't want to repeat that mistake. So um yeah, what happens if they get down below 5% and then we spend every penny we can scrounge up to buy real estate and then the rates go back up into the sevens or eights again and that balloon comes
Mhm.
due.
Mhm.
So I think that I'm not quite certain how to prepare somebody except for I would, obvious grandma's financial advice is put some money away, don't over leverage.
Yes.
And I think what you're saying is 100% true. It's very easy to pull out as much equity as possible to scale at a high speed, but you may see some people this next year in a world of hurt because they can't refinance their
I think
properties.
on that commercial side, Austin too, at least even on our residential side, is if the deal works at 8%, it's going to be great at 5%,
Yeah.
right? So really trying to anticipate that. Um, I was kind of taught in the beginning and it worked out sometimes, but when rates went up, it didn't work out so well. More so with insurance, for us in Galveston was right for the cash out refi on the residential side, take the money, right? Get the money because you can go leverage it somewhere else and get a much better return. Right. And I think in more stable environments, that makes a lot of sense. What I mean about stable is you got stable insurance rate costs, you got stable tax rates, things like that. But if you're in a volatile market, especially in Galveston where we started, where taxes went up, appraisals went up, which forced taxes to go up, and then you had insurance costs just really, really go really high with Texas windstorm and flood and all those things. And you took that you went all the way leverage. You took as much as you could. At the moment, it seemed like a great idea, right? But now, 3 years later, your mortgage payment is now five, six, $700 more per month, and all that cash flow that you had back then is has just evaporated,
Yeah.
right? So, but back to what I mentioned, what I said beginning is if you can get the deal to work at being less leveraged and at a higher interest rate, if things change, especially on the commercial side, you got that 5-year balloon, fine, right? Let's just refinance. I'm still okay.
Yeah, 100%. I want to open up the chat and if anybody wants to come off and ask Jarrett any questions, we got about 5 minutes left. But um always maintaining a certain amount of equity in in your properties. Albert, you mentioned following those trend lines. I think, some of these guys are not doing that. Um, Maybe they fell asleep at the wheel. They bought at 4.5%. Um, and kind of understanding to me, Jarrett, I think that there's a correlation between the commercial side and the residential side because I know you do both. Um, I always tell people that commercial more or less follows residential trends. It kind of lags behind a little bit. Interest rates are usually consistent, but a little bit higher. And I think that anyone that's borrowing money at a high level and they're not following those trends, they can kind of get stuck with um, a situation where the banks need to call their note or refinance, and they don't have enough equity to do it, and that really,
Yeah. There's the different spectrums of the investors from the first person that's going in. They're just thinking about, I know that I want to build equity and I want to build wealth and I want to use real estate. I love a four family unit where they live in one and they rent the other three out. That's a beautiful thing. Or a duplex where they live in one and they rent the other side out. That's great. And
yeah,
that's like the perfect way to get involved with buying your first property. And
yeah,
then as soon as you can, then you can move out of that and then the ball is rolling, right? But I think that's a great first step, right? It's like, it's easy to get into a qualification with a traditional loan, whether it's
yeah.
FHA or something like that, but you can get in, and there's no reason that somebody can't get in and become an investor. Once they do that, then the rest, it starts to snowball, right? It gets
Hmm.
bigger and bigger, and pretty soon you're buying apartments, and it's kind of a cool thing. So I think the I'd like to, if there was one thing to take from this, it would be, if you're thinking about it, you've been thinking about it, pull the trigger.
Pull it.
Mhm.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
We have one thing that we say that we tell our students is because it's fear, right? It's fear of the unknown. And we've talked about this whole episode is having to do with risk. You can't eliminate all the risk. If you eliminate all the risk, then you're not really going to get a good return on your investment. So we tell people, if you're scared, do it scared,
yeah.
right? And I mentioned before, take that big bite, right? Not too much, but take that big bite, and we're going to figure out how to chew that along the way, right? We're going to figure it out. So having a good team around you, having people that you can lean on for support, people that are many, many steps ahead of you, going in the same direction that you want to be going in, those are all very important. And trying to do it on your own, like Jared said, that you can only get so far on your own, but building a team after you get that experience, you become a better leader. Like all of those are really, really great points that Jared brought up. I appreciate that today.
Last question, Jared. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Uh,
Three books that all investors, business owners, or anybody that's just trying to live a better life. Three books that you want to recommend.
I recommend Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. It's just it's an opportunity to really be able to expand how we think about things. Um, the book, The One Thing, I think The One Thing is great. And then I'll put Shift and the Millionaire Real Estate Agent in the same must-read camp, so it turns into four. But I would say that those are the the four picks that I would recommend.
Those
Those
are
are
excellent.
those are on my list. Those are
Yeah,
all four. Those are on my top
I've
10
got
right there.
those
So,
too. Yeah.
so
Excellent.
Jared, thank you so much for your time. Any final words?
No, it's just a privilege to be here. Thanks. I enjoyed our conversation and things past, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to be on your show today.
Well, we'll definitely have you back. I'm sure there's so much more that we can learn from you and your experience. You've seen a lot of different things, and you're in a really unique market, so we can definitely learn a whole lot more from you. So, Jared, thank you so much, everybody. Albert, thank you for being on the call. Everybody who's on the live call, don't forget to like and subscribe. This will be on YouTube in the next 24 hours. We'll be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Alberto, you want to close this out?
Have an awesome week. Enjoy this weather. Get outside, get some sun on your face, right? Move your body. Okay. Make good choices health
Let's
wise. Let's
go.
go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.